What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Steep Stuff Podcast. I'm your host, James Lariello, and I'm so excited to bring you guys an episode today with none other than Addison Smith. Super excited to catch up with Addison. Addison is a coach for CTS, that's right, Carmichael Training Systems in Colorado Springs. Just getting back from OCC and the UTMB weekend. I caught up with Addison to talk all things coaching as well as racing as well. Addison's got a crazy racing resume to his own right, so I was super excited to catch up with him and talk all about what he's been up to over the last few years as far as on the racing scene as well as in the coaching scene. This is a really informative episode. We talk about a lot of different types of systems, a lot of coaching, just coaching situations, what it's like coaching over at some of the biggest races in the world, and kind of how he balances both racing and coaching at the highest level of the sport. So without further ado, I hope you guys enjoy this one. Really enjoy speaking with Addison. He's just so informative and just so knowledgeable. So it's a lot of good stuff. I think you guys will take a lot away from this one. So without further ado, Addison Smith.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are live.
Addison Smith, welcome to the Steep Stuff Podcast. How's it going, buddy?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me. Excited to talk and hang out for a little bit.
Yeah, man. Me too. You know, it's funny, man. Like, I can remember running the idea of a concept of an idea, like past you on a run, like 2 or 3 years ago about this podcast. And you're like, yeah, that sounds pretty cool. Like, that would be dope. And then, you know, here we are a few years later and we're rolling. So it's kind of a full circle moment, which is kind of cool.
No, it's pretty awesome that you've been grinding at this thing for so long, got some awesome guests, and it's really taken off. So kudos to you for sticking it out, because I know there's a lot of podcasters that like get excited about it and it's like, oh, this is so fun. And then like you get to episode 30, you're running out of guests and it's like, I don't know if it's worth it anymore. But kudos to you for getting it done.
No, I appreciate it. It's definitely a grind, but yeah, dude, happy to have you on, man. Maybe maybe for the audience, introduce yourself, talk about a little bit about your background, just a tiny bit about what you do with CTS, and then some things that you do as a runner as well. And then we'll kind of break it down from there.
For sure. So, Addison Smith, born in the Midwest. My family, they're international teachers. And so I bopped around to different countries growing up, graduated from a school in Korea, and went to college with the, expectation of running. So I did cross country and track at Calvin University. It's a small school in Grand Rapids, Michigan, coached by Brian Deemer. And I was definitely sold on the idea of, a small D3 school where it's like running is our passion, but certainly, I really paid mind to the academic path that I was on. I wanted to be a coach from, my high school days, and just, how many awesome coaches have poured into me and my friends over the years. And certainly, with studying kinesiology, it was always the plan to do that in some capacity. And, with leaning into running over time, there was certainly a lot of opportunities to learn from my great coaches and, participate in opportunities of like team sport where you're doing something bigger than yourself. And it's like, oh, this is what, team sports and team building and kind of an awesome competitive community can do for someone. And so I definitely wanted to emulate that. And at CTS, we have an awesome team of coaches. And so it feels that way, behind the scenes when we're kind of bouncing ideas off of each other. And then certainly, with the athletes I work with, the camaraderie that I get to have with each and every one of them in kind of that one-on-one coaching space is pretty sweet.
So cool. So cool. Really quick, I do want to plug Michigan a little bit. You're a U of M alum. I'm a gigantic Michigan fan.
Oh yeah.
I have a lot of family that went to Michigan. Maybe talk a little bit about your time at University of Michigan, getting your master's degree.
For sure. Yeah. So yeah, go blue for sure. We have a big game. I don't know when you're going to post this. Hopefully it's after or right before a win against Oklahoma.
Yeah, hopefully
we beat the
shit out of Oklahoma.
Yeah. It'll be close. I'm a little worried, but we had a good showing for the first week. But anyways, master's degree I got in movement science in the kinesiology department there. For me, it was a natural progression of, I learned a lot, but there was certainly a lot more that I felt like I wanted to uncover in terms of, learning about the specifics of breaking down the biomechanics of different gait patterns, whether running or walking, talking about how, to read MRIs and talking about specifically, how the body adapts to altitude or heat stress and, the different pathways of, running different intensities and how you go about fueling for those things and the metabolic processes that happen, when you're doing different endurance events. And so that was really formative for me. And from there, I was, an intern at CTS, bouncing back and forth to finish my master's and coming out here for a summer and then going back to finish it. And then, I was brought on full time at CTS. And so I've been in Colorado Springs now for almost 4 years. It feels like it's only been like a couple months. Time flies. Like you're at all these races, you're doing all these things, and you like look back and it's like, oh my gosh, like I've been doing this for a little bit now, and it's been awesome. So yeah,
dude, and it's so cool, man. Like one of the things I find so neat is like I met you probably within a year and a half of like when you first started, and like you were still learning, still doing your thing, and then just to see like how much your career has really progressed. Like when I was doing research on this episode, like doing some research on you, the background stuff, just the amount of like just reviews that you have from coaching and stuff like that was like holy shit, like you've really built like quite a book of business, which is it's just amazing to see. So
I appreciate it. I mean, I think what's exciting about all the CTS coaches is like I came in obviously really green in the coaching space, had the background in the science, but certainly not the experience of like actually working one-on-one with people outside of kind of just general strength training and fitness at a gym for an internship and things like that. And so to have people that have been coaches for 10, 15, 20, 30 years and they're like, you'll get it when you kind of feel like you're kind of stumbling around with your first few athletes and kind of picking their brains. I think that's one of the biggest bonuses for me and my other coaches. It's like you can really lean on that expertise that other people have. And certainly I still have this where, I get a Tour de Jean athlete, for example. And of course, I have experience working with other athletes who have done really long distance projects, whether 100 miles or longer. But, a unique race where I can just go, hey, Coop, hey, Fitz, you guys have raced this, you've had athletes do this. Like, what are kind of these specific things to think about at this aid station or when you're going through this coal, for example? And it really goes a long way as far as me feeling as prepared as I can be, because ultimately, like, that's my goal for my athletes is to set them up for success as much as possible.
So cool. What is it like? Because like Coop is like probably, I don't know, top 3 most famous coaches on the planet right now. Like. Yeah. And coach is like some of the best athletes to have ever done it in our sport. What is it like having him as a resource? Like that's got to be pretty cool.
Oh, it's so nice. And it's not only just like, so we have continuing ed calls every week and, I can pick his brain whenever, but it's like going out to these races and having the opportunity to interact with him, at an aid station, when his athlete might be going through a tough spot and just knowing how he responds and reacts to it. Or, someone has some sort of blister foot issue and him or Adam Ferdinandsen's kind of like a resident foot guy. He really put a lot of time into kind of working at aid stations and taking care of footwear and talking to Tanya, who's a big kind of Western States foot care veteran and kind of picking their brains on that front, as well as just kind of understanding, when I can get him out on a run or we spent a lot of time together at UTMB with the rest of the coaches and just kind of hearing his process for, where was he 20 years ago when he got started and what were the things that he was doing to kind of elevate himself and learn more about the space and, think about how to be an ultra running coach when ultra running coaching wasn't really a thing yet. And so, super awesome in that regard. And it also kind of just opens my eyes to, coaching and crewing professional athletes because, when they come to Javelina or Western States, like we're all out there and supporting these people. And so being able to work with Jeff McGavro or being able to, talk to Abby Hall at one of these races and picking their brains or, one of them coming out and doing one of these LTVO2 tests that we have at our office, like all these things is just more information. And I feel like kind of catching me up and getting me ahead in terms of like my growth and development. Because, at the end of the day, we all want to be at the top of the sport or at the top of our game in whatever field of choice that we have. And so being able to have those touch points with people that are farther along in the journey really, I feel like goes a long way for me and the younger coaches.
So cool, man. I couldn't imagine. Like, honestly, I think that's the best thing. No matter what you're doing in this life, like whatever you choose as a profession, it's so important to have like a mentor and have people mentoring you as you go along the way. And like, that's a great person to have. Like, I just like, and not just him, like the other coaches as well. But like, I just feel like you're really set up for success to be able to
I appreciate it.
What you do.
That's the goal. That's the goal.
Let's talk UTMB, dude. So you both, you raced OCC, you just got back. And you obviously were there in a coaching perspective as well. Mm-hmm. Maybe talk about your experience in general. We could break it up. We could talk about the race as well. And then we'll talk about what it was like coaching athletes over there, and how that went.
Totally. So this was my third time going out to the UTMB circus. It really does feel like a circus. Like I feel like that's the best way to describe it, but in the best ways, because you have thousands and thousands of different people coming out to cheer, coming out to crew, coming out to race. And so, a little mountain town is turned into this like trail running heaven of like all of the different brands, all of the different pros, all of the different, athletes and coaches that you'd ever want to see and kind of get to meet and kind of just experience this kind of journey and this big race event together. It's all happening, for a whole week, which I think is really unique and awesome. And so for me, I got into OCC through the lottery. That was certainly not the plan for this year. My goal was to race Comrades. I signed up for that in November. And so for the audience who's not familiar, Comrades is a 56-mile race in South Africa. It's a road ultra that has about 23,000 people at it. And so for me, it was, a big goal, just having spent time in South Africa growing up, having kind of, been a fan of ultra running before I got into ultra running. It's like that was a big bucket list event for me. Like that was what I was going for this year. And then I got into OCC and I was like, well, I'm not going to turn that down. Like I have these two opportunities, but like very different ends of the spectrum in terms of the type of training that you would do to be successful. One requires spending a lot of time in the mountains, getting a bunch of vert. And the other one is like, you got to spend some time on the roads. You got to pound your quads a little bit and get them used to kind of being in a similar biomechanical pattern for a long portion of the race with a lot of road downhill, which like beats you up, which it beat me up a little bit, but awesome experience. If anyone's ever thinking about Comrades or going out to South Africa, I couldn't recommend it enough. It was such a cool experience. But in terms of kind of the process for getting to OCC, it was certainly tough to transition after, June doing Comrades, coming back, crew in Western States, and then going to see my family in Michigan. And then it was like, well, we got a month. We're going to do what we can here. Like I've done mountain ultras before. I have this time. I had a little bit of more downtime in terms of like time spent crewing, time spent doing other kind of things that I do at CTS. And so it was a month of, it didn't feel like cramming, but in a sense, like I'm getting as specific as I can with this time that I have. And so got out there, I was feeling pretty fit and, things didn't go quite to plan. I was hoping to be in, the top 50 and run around 6 hours. But even like, I would say no one felt like it went to plan for them because I don't know if you heard there was a route change the day before, different aid stations. And so in terms of like planning beforehand, it kind of got thrown out the window and it was just like, we're going to race. We're going to see what happens. And so I had a lot of fun. For me, I get a lot of joy out of just competing and kind of being in the mix. And so I love races like Sonoma or Speed Goat or like these races where like the density of competition, it feels like there's always someone in front of you, always someone behind you. And so you're just always engaged in that. And I know some people get a lot of joy out of just being in the mountains and not worrying about the competition aspect. That's just not me. Like I love mixing it up. And I love trying to chase people down. But in terms of the race itself, definitely hit a low point at Triant. I should have filled up at Martini I don't know. My American pronunciation isn't great.
It's okay.
I should have filled up there. They said there wasn't going to be water opportunities there. And I thought, I'd get up the climb a little bit quicker, but it was a lot more humid and it wasn't hot, but it certainly wasn't as cold and rainy as expected. And so I got a little dry at Triant. And so then that next climb was a grind. It was like, just reset, try to get your stomach around, try to get rehydrated. And then I was able to rally a little bit, which I was really proud about. Going into Latour, I saw my coach, saw some of my, colleagues, and it was like, this isn't going as well as I want, but we're going to rally, we're going to make the most of this thing. And I was able to pick some people off, which I was really proud of, because I feel like at the end of the day, for someone like me who's been in the sport a decent amount of time, but I'm trying to expose myself to a bunch of different races, not only, personally to compete in a bunch of different styles of ultras, but also for the sake of being a coach, and not to say that like, I want to use my experiences at a race to dictate how I'm going to coach someone else for that race, but certainly knowing a course and also being an example of, I practicing what I preach as far as like when things are going south, what are we going to do to pick up the pieces and rally? I felt like I was able to do that. And so it was an awesome experience, awesome event. And then it was time to do a lot of coaching and crewing after that.
So crazy. So crazy. I have a few questions for you.
Totally.
First one is you were top, where were you, like 12th or 14th at Canyons? Like I got to remind the audience.
14th.
Like, you're a stud runner as well.
Thanks,
You're not just a good coach. You're also a fantastic runner. Because I know it's like in the majors, it's top 10 usually gets an auto bid, but sometimes based off the UTMB the UTMB indexes, they'll extend a few more down to give people auto bids in. Do you get an auto bid in for next year for OCC?
So I haven't heard that I do. And I think because this year Kodiak is the major, it used to be Canyons that, if I were to get 14th, maybe at Kodiak, given that it's probably going to be a competitive field, that, maybe they would extend an invitation. But I got in solely through the lottery with only running Speed Goat, which, to be fair, not that this is like a shade throwing podcast or anything.
You had a great result at Speed Goat too.
Thanks, dude. Yeah. No, I was pumped with that. That was my best high altitude mountain race that I've done. And so I was really happy to put that together. But in terms of the lottery, I was like, I got one stone in and I got in. I was like, it has to be my index. Like, there's just no way. But maybe I was just selected. They don't tell you what the criteria is. And so maybe it was just like, I got super lucky, or maybe they lean a little bit more into like, if you have a higher index, they let you in. Yeah. I don't know. I'd love to know.
Yours is like almost 800. It's pretty damn high. So yeah, dude, that's so interesting. Okay. And one more question on the course itself and just running. How much did it mentally throw you off going from what a 54K was supposed to be, and then they changed it to like a 61K? How much different was that course from the original course? Did they extend some climbs? Like, what did they do for that to make it different?
Yeah. So, the first thing that they did is, so after you got through Champélac, you go downhill for maybe about a mile, and then you go immediately back up and over to Triant versus for the changed course, we went down to Martigny. So it was maybe an extra 2,000 feet of descent down into the town before you had a bigger climb up to kind of the point before you descend down in Triant, if that's making sense. I forget the name of the col there, but you still go to Fourclaw, which is the spot where you see a lot of cheering that then goes down into Triant.
Sorry, I'm trying to remember the name of the cole as well. But yeah, no, you got it.
Yeah. But in terms of kind of my thoughts about the race, honestly, I was like a little less climbing, a little more, distance. I'm like, okay, cool. That's in my wheelhouse. I'm down for it. For me, what was most challenging was, not knowing whether we were going to get torrential downpour rain and snow versus, it being a little bit more humid. And so in terms of my gear choice, I started with a jacket, probably shouldn't have. But really at the end of the day, I relished the opportunity to be have a wrench thrown into things, because it's like, well, we're all going to figure this out. And I feel like I'm coming in as someone who makes smart choices in races, but maybe isn't as, race ready for a mountain race. So it's like the more wrenches thrown in, the more some crazy things will happen, and maybe I'm moving through the field well. So I was all for, the change, but certainly I could see other people where they spent weeks and weeks out there preparing, and they're like, what the heck, then I should have trained in this other climb. But it's how it is. And there was wrenches thrown into UTMB as well with all the rain and
we'll get to that.
Sleet and snow. But yeah.
All right. So you come off the race, you finish your race up. Race was what? It was a Wednesday or Thursday?
Thursday.
It's Thursday.
Yeah.
Okay. So then then you got to put your coaching hat on.
I do.
You got to
Yeah.
be so tired afterwards. Like,
Yeah,
what is that like transitioning from, okay, my race is over. Now I got to put my coaching hat on and I got to assist and help other folks' race. Like, what is that like?
Yeah, I mean, what's really nice is I got there on Monday, and so I was able to get a couple pre-race meetings done out of the way before my race, and it was a nice way to just get out of the house and not feel like I was just like trying to get as much sleep and rest and pent up in our Airbnb, and I was able to walk around, meet athletes then, and get some touch points, but. Yeah, things turned around and I had to rebound pretty quickly, and I was a little worried where my head was going to be at, just because, when you're really tired in terms of making mistakes for my athletes, it's like I need to be on when it's time to be on.
Yeah.
But the nice thing is with CCC starting at 9 and then the first opportunity to crew is at Chamonix, like the leaders aren't getting there until 2:33 p.m. and my athlete was getting there around 5-ish. And so I could sleep in a little bit, I could rally a little bit, and then come in, caffeinated and ready to roll later in the day versus, if I had to go to the start line, that probably would have been rough that next day.
Can you talk about like what is your role like on race day as a coach? Are you doing everything from not just pep talk, but like being able to talk about the race, being able to talk, like have their bottles of nutrition for them? Like what is it like what are you doing specifically?
Yeah, so it really depends on the race. And for UTMB, you're only allowed one crew member at every aid station. And so the past few years when I've had athletes there, because I had multiple athletes, I didn't want to leave someone high and dry if I said I was going to crew them. And so typically I have, someone else crew them and I'm just there for emotional support and I can help that crew member, when I see them before they're ready to crew. And then when the athlete comes in, I can be behind the aid station and then relay information of like, he needs this, get out the foot care kit. He needs an extra bottle or he's cramping. Let's get some salt pills out. That's the kind of, help that I'm typically providing at UTMB. But, for this one athlete, she's a pretty good 100K runner, but she's fairly new into the sport. And so she didn't have a lot of great crew options. She lives in Costa Rica, doesn't have like a big trail running community immediately around her. And so I wanted to really walk her through everything. And because she was my only CCC athlete, I committed early on in the year that like, I'm going to crew you. We're going to figure this out together. And I think that really, one, helped her, calm her nerves a little bit and know that like going to CCC and getting this done was possible. And two, I think just the opportunity for someone who's relatively new to this, I wanted to make sure that everything was dialed. And if there was something that went awry, that we can really fix things. But my athlete was a stud. She, had some cramps in the middle, but we kind of got her hydration figured out at Chamonix and she rallied really well. And I was super proud of the way that she performed and kind of her first big 100K stage. She qualified at Puerto Vallarta, but if anyone knows about that course, it is very kind of rolling and not technical. And the climbing, the vert per mile is probably like 115 feet per mile different, less so at that race. And so this was a big step up and she learned a lot and performed really well.
That's so cool. Did you have any athletes on in UTMB proper? Like, did you get?
I did. Okay. Yeah. So he got the full experience of the crazy weather and the route change and all that. I heard it was wild weather out there. Because though there's a lot of people that, you have to race one of these 100-mile races to get in, the drop rate wasn't as high as I thought it would be. And, a lot of people, even though they looked really rough in Courmayeur when I was kind of hanging out the aid station waiting for my guy, a lot of people rallied really well. And I think it's just a testament to, the type of people that go to this race. It's not a bunch of rookies. Like, you got to qualify, you got to put your time in to get those stones. And certainly they were ready to weather that nasty weather.
Yeah. Dude, I mean, what a race in general. Like, I got to be honest with you. Like, I know this is a short trail podcast, but damn, dude, like I can't say I was not like really impressed and like blown away watching like Ben Demon and Tom and those guys at the front. What time did you go into Courmayeur? Like, were you there like much later, or like did you get to go see some of the front of the race? Like, what did you?
Yeah, so unfortunately this year I couldn't follow the elites as much just because my athlete was coming through to the finish and I wanted to see her finish around like midnight to 2 a.m. And so she finished around like 1:30. And so at that point it was like, okay, time to take a nap, time to take care of myself before I go and help out this other athlete's crew. And so I got to Courmayeur later in the day. It was more of kind of the middle of the pack to the cutoff, because actually the situation for my athlete is he forgot some of his nutrition. Like, he was talking to his significant other, and he was in a daze, and she was like, "You need 2 bags of nutrition." He's like, "No, I only need 1." And then he went through the night, and it took him longer. And so we actually rushed him through the Courmayeur aid station, where like he only spent 90 minutes in and out because he had to chase the cutoff there. And so that was quite hectic, but pretty awesome too, in terms of like the crew's ability to rise to the occasion and kind of get him everything he need and send him out. But yeah, at Courmayeur, thankfully, by the time I got there, it wasn't as nasty weather at that point, but they had been through it. They were all wet in all of their extra cold gear. And yeah, it was a little bit of a war zone, but a lot of people were rallying and making it just past that cutoff, which was really cool to see.
So cool, man. You know what? I can't think of like, we don't get a lot outside of like maybe the rut last year where there was like significant weather, like it was very snowy and stuff. We don't get in the summer a lot of like really out there types of races where that'll be like big and televised and like put on. But this one was really special. Like I said, Ben Demon came in Courmayeur. He was like, "Yo, it was like the Himalaya. Like it was wild." So yeah, that was it was kind of cool to follow that and see the athletes kind of going through it and trying to figure out, just because I don't know, a lot of these people, everybody goes through training blocks, right? And it's most of the people are in summer. You don't really get to face that weather outside of, crazy rainstorms and maybe some hail here and there, but like to have to deal with snow conditions, like you got to put your winter hat on. That's fun.
Totally. And I think, as coaches, my goal is to not only get them fit enough to kind of race to their goals and kind of prepare them for pacing well and their nutrition, but really it's like getting them to know what they're going to do when shit hits the fan, whether it's like they drop a bunch of their nutrition. What are you going to do? Are you going to be able to handle the stuff that they have at the aid stations? Like, have you practiced with solid food? Or say they're dehydrated and they're getting different, feelings of maybe onset hyponatremia. They're starting to get all puffy. Like, what are you going to do in that situation? Or have you practiced with your cold gear? And so it was really rewarding to, talk to my athlete afterwards. And he's like, at no point did I feel like I wasn't prepared for this situation that was totally crazy and something that you couldn't necessarily know was going to happen. Because it's like we went through all the scenarios. We kind of had the checklist in training of all the things that might go wrong. And at the end of the day, because it's such a long race, you're not going to hit it perfectly almost ever. Sometimes, someone has a miracle day, but more likely than not, you're going to have to be troubleshooting during the event. And how can I, as, your coach, make sure that you're not going to panic and you have some options for whatever goes wrong.
Interesting. I got to ask you on the nutrition front, like, what is it like working with these athletes, especially in cold races like this, where out of the blue, like we're getting rain and snow and sleet in a world of lots of gels and like liquid nutrition. Were people kind of abandoning that idea and going to more solids? Like, what was it like in some of these aid stations?
Yeah, I mean, it's really kind of individualized in that sense. But, what I try to recommend is you got to have a variety of options. Like, you got to have your A plan and have your B plan and your C plan as far as like what things work. If this doesn't work, if my stomach's off or we're in this environmental condition, what are we going to do secondarily? So for example, like if it was totally the opposite and it's a super hot race, your sweat rate's going to be really high. You're going to have to be plugging a lot more fluids. And if all you're doing is liquid nutrition, then, you're not going to be able to take in as many fluids as you need because your stomach's going to be killing because you're taking in way more calories than you had planned on. And so do you have a couple other options? Do you have a few gels that you can take? Do you have some solid food you can take so that, if it's a little bit hotter than planned, you can rely on more of an electrolyte mix with less calories so you can lean into, getting in more fluids while also not overdoing the carbohydrates at any point. And vice versa, if it's a little bit colder out and you're not drinking quite as much, then maybe you can rely a little bit more on that liquid nutrition, but also your stomach, because you're going to be probably moving a little bit slower, can probably handle some more solid foods too. So you can kind of get ahead on the carbohydrate game and kind of settle your stomach before you're forced into some tougher, hotter conditions maybe later in a mountain race.
Interesting. What were the aid stations at? Like maybe you could speak to OCC and UTMB.
Yeah.
Speak to all of them.
Yeah.
I've heard good things, man. I've heard cheeses. I've heard like cured meats. I've heard good things. Like,
No, totally.
Talk about these aid stations. Like, what are we,
Yeah.
what are we talking
Yeah.
about?
I mean, for OCC, there's definitely not as much because it's not as long of a race. But like my favorite part of going out to UTMB is hanging out at the Treant aid station with the middle of the back of the Packers. Because what they do at that aid station is they have like the aid station set up for all the racers. And then they have a crew area where there's just dudes like cooking up sausages and cooking up French fries. And they have like a DJ. And so when an athlete comes in from a different country, like say there's an athlete from Spain, then they're going to pull up a Spanish song and everyone's going to try to sing along. And then there's an athlete from Iceland. And so then they're pulling up some Eurovision Iceland stuff going on there.
Oh, shit.
So it is so fun and everyone's exhausted, but they're having a good time. And, you know, some people are drinking beers, some people are having coffee, and some people are just chilling on French fries. It is such a great environment. One of the best kind of aid station experiences because you're in this tiny French town with this little pink church and there's just hundreds of people huddled up, just hanging out together.
That's so crazy. All right, so I got to ask you the question now. Like you've done the Golden Trail series, you've seen Western States, you've seen UTMB. Yeah. Like what has been like the pinnacle experience for you? Like what have you liked the most?
Ooh, that's tough because I think for me, racing wise, I'd have a different answer than crewing and coaching wise because like bad water crewing is a wild experience. Like it's certainly not for everyone, but like just being out there on that road with a bunch of white cars and your athlete going through it and, you know, trying to pace and crew them where it's just a constant like water, ice, fuel, like all you're focusing on is just making sure they don't get dry. That was pretty awesome and pretty crazy. The Golden Trail final in Madeira, that was a super cool experience. Just like, not that it was like a vacation by any means because everyone was grinding out there, but like to be in a hotel with just a bunch of runners and to like get bussed around to a different course, lay it all out on the line, go to bed and then try to do it again. Like that was a pretty surreal experience too. And I'd say one of the most beautiful places I've ever visited. And so I'm definitely, you know, if you're thinking about doing Mewett at some point, Madeira Island Ultra Trail, highly recommend. That was pretty sweet. Western States, as far as like the spectacle and just like the top of like the performance side of our sport, like there's nothing quite like, you know, people battling it out, you know, through Forest Hill, which is such a cool coaching and crewing experience. But I mean, I also just love the local races where you have just a bunch of buddies that are going to hang out and grind it out for a couple hours. And so I think that's what's the cool thing about ultra running. I mean, for me, when, you know, I was, you know, doing some marathons and then coming back to doing some ultras, you know, I'm always thinking like, yeah, you're marathoning in different places, but it's like the same experience kind of every time. Whereas like you could do an ultra that is totally different than the other one and it's still the same sport and it's still an awesome community. So I just love that aspect of it where it's like you can go to a bunch of different races around the US and have a totally different experience, but it'd be an awesome and, you know, a really kind of collaborative, kind of loving community at all of them. So
crazy. So great. All right. One of the things I can remember this from a couple years ago, last time we ran, I was thinking about this. You said you told me last time you'd eventually go back to Golden Trail. Is there a possibility we get you back doing Golden Trail?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's tough because it's like the idea of doing Black Canyon is super cool. Like I did Comrades this year. Like I love, you know, a new challenge, but certainly I have unfinished business with a lot of those courses where I feel like, you know, being here in Colorado Springs, having a lot more vert in my legs now and just, you know, just the more time you spend racing these races, the better you can pace them, the better you know kind of just the feel of the intensity in some of these races. Like Broken Arrow was my first major trail race and it kicked my butt. Like I want to go back there and kind of right that wrong a little bit. Quebec Mega Trail, I did that when it was the Golden Trail National Series qualifier. That was awesome. So certainly I want to go back and kind of rewrite some of these races, but also, you know, they're putting out different races for these qualifiers every year. And, you know, it's another opportunity to see a different part of the country and race some different guys.
Super cool. So I got to ask you this, because this is an interesting question. One of the things I really admire about you that I like to see in folks is that, like, you're not just an athlete, you're also a coach, and the coach is like your main thing. You do both, and you do both at a very high level. What how, like, obviously you said you're a very competitive mentally when you approach it. You're a competitive athlete. how do you approach it now? Is it also taking notes and learning, like, for you, like, is it more research now for you when you do these races as a coach, so you can learn how to apply this from a coaching perspective to your athletes if they were to race like the same race? Or like, how do you approach it now? Like,
Totally. Yeah, no, that's a great question. I feel like it's definitely evolved over the years because like coming from college, coming into the sport and having some success early, it was definitely like, I want to compete at the highest level. Like this, I care about this just as much as my coaching. And then you start coaching and like you realize kind of how professionalized everyone else is around you and kind of the expectations there as a CTS coach. And it's like, well, yes, I want to do really well. And I don't want to take away from the fact that like I train hard, I come into these races like wanting to compete and that's my goal. But at the end of the day, like I'm a coach and that's my like big mission is to be the best coach I can be. And if I can race well and battle it out and have a great time at these races, I'm going to do that too. But at the end of the day, like I'm here to learn. I'm here to, be here for my athletes first and foremost. And so like, I'm not picking races where we're racing the same race ideally. And I'm going out to take notes first and foremost. But, if I can get in and rip a couple heads off and have a lot of fun battling it out, like I love that stuff. Like it is the most fun. And to be able to do that, for 4 to 5 hours where, you have highs and lows and, you're chasing after someone who like is really good at climbing. So they kick your butt and then you're trying to chase them down a downhill. Like that is the most fun thing in the world to me. So
man, dude, what a good answer. Love that. What's next for you racing wise? Like, what do you think? What's on the bucket list or something that you want to get to in 26 or with the time we got left in 25?
Yeah, no, it's tough because, for me, a lot of my schedule does revolve around going to these crewing events. So like I'll be at Javelina crewing athletes. I'll definitely be back at Western States crewing athletes, Leadville, UTMB. But Black Canyon looks awesome. It's another one of those races where kind of like how I talked about, you're going to see someone ahead of you, a pack of dudes. There's going to be a pack of dudes behind you. And, you're doing your best to mix it up with a competitive field. And so that's super exciting to me. I'm probably going to sign up for that. But I certainly, want to get my mountain chops back. Like I felt like, at OCC, I had just a small amount of time to try to like piece it all together for that race. And like, if I could go back and if I can get a week just to spend out there or, a couple months here in Colorado Springs, I think it would go a long way. And I think it'd be fun to feel a little bit more competitive than I was this past year.
Yeah. And still, I mean, dude, you were just right out of top 100. Like you're right there, which is like for people that I think there's like what 3,000 or something like people in that race or some
there's a lot of
ridiculous number.
Yeah.
Did you see Jim Walmsley on the starting line? Like, did you see any of like the tip of the spear athletes on the starting line?
I did. It's always fun because I feel like the non-elite or non-competitive athletes, like of course they're competing their butts out, but like in terms of like the people that aren't trying to like podium or be top 50, they're not necessarily warming up for a 60K race, but then you have these dudes that are like going to go hard, like out the gate, and ladies too. And so it's always fun. All of the pros are finding these little nooks and crannies in this town to warm up. And so it's like all the people that are competing at the front, they're all doing the same thing. And so like you're chatting with them, you're saying hi. One of our athletes, Joaquin Lopez, who's typically, a big time 100-mile racer from Ecuador, he dropped down in distance because he's doing worlds here in a couple weeks. And so I was hanging out with him. We were doing strides together and just talking about the race changes and stuff. And so that's one of the kind of most fun parts of kind of the experience is getting to, kind of catch up with people before and after the race and kind of recounting the stories of like the climb, like, oh, you kicked my butt up this climb. Like, how are you feeling? And all that stuff. I got to hang out with Hannah Allgood for a little bit of the Martini climb, and that was awesome. So yeah, it's really cool to see everyone out there because I feel like everyone has a slightly different schedule for the year, but like there's these races where everyone comes together for, and people are going to be out there. Pikes Peak is like that for a lot of local Colorado mountain runners where it's like, I haven't seen you in a couple months. I know you're shredding and you crush these races. And it's like, cool, let's go and do it here together. And so just the opportunity to kind of be in community with these other runners that are really trying to be at the top of the podium is really fun.
Yeah, so cool, so cool. So I imagine you'll be doing it every year. Then you'll be going back to Chamonix.
Oh yeah, whether racing or not, I'll be coaching and crewing there for I don't know how many years.
I've never been, dude. I gotta go. It's like every year we're like, we got to do this. Like I think now, like from a media perspective, Like, you know what? I really would love to do ETC and then just do
Ooh,
ETC and then
yeah,
do the media throughout the rest of the
yeah,
week, which would be kind of
yeah,
fun. I
yeah.
don't know. It'd be kind of, but yeah, that's a different story. Let's talk about nutrition and hydration. One of the cool
Cool.
things we kind of talked about offline,
Hmm.
and I told you this, I'm going to get a sweat test tomorrow through CTS. This was something you were talking about, like how you guys offer that. Maybe talk about some of these sweat tests, and like what you can expect from them and what you do. Cause I'm just very curious as like what to expect and like how to dial in my hydration. So.
Totally. Yeah. So we use precision hydration software. We kind of purchased it at as a company, just seeing it as a value add, to our lab services. So we do LT, VO2 tests, and then we do this precision hydration sweat test. And so what we're doing in the sweat test is we are getting the kind of concentration of the sodium that you have in your sweat per liter of sweat lost. That's kind of the goal of what we're doing. And so the nice thing about this test is you really only have to do it once because it's very genetically determined. And it kind of puts you on a spectrum of, are you a heavy salt sweater or are you a not very salt sweater? And in terms of kind of what that means to your hydration plan, it really depends. The results then dictate what do you do from an electrolyte standpoint for, various environmental conditions that you find yourself in on race day. And so there's one piece of the puzzle there with the sodium sweat concentration. And then the other piece of the puzzle is to then on your own time, go and figure out, what is your sweat rate for a certain environmental condition. And so my recommendations are always, you get this test and that's a lot of great information, but you need to pair it with knowing your sweat rate for kind of the race conditions that you're training for. And so doing that a couple times a year in a couple different environmental conditions is typically my recommendation because we're not trying to like pin it down perfectly. We're just trying to put you in a good ballpark because as you know, whether it's a shorter mountain race or, you're doing UTMB, the weather over the course of that day is going to drastically change. Like a lot of these mountain races, you're starting at 7, 8 in the morning, and in the mountains, it's going to be, 40 to 60 degrees. And then by the time you get to 10, 11, 12, it could be raining and cold. It could be 80 and sunny, and the sun's beating down at 8,000 feet. And so in terms of kind of pairing those things together, then you have an idea of, where should you be leaning in terms of the products that you're taking in on the kind of electrolyte and kind of drink and fluid side of things, as well as like, do you need a couple gels with a lot of sodium too, or salt pills to supplement that?
How do you get, this is just like out of pure curiosity, how do you obtain your sweat rate? Like, how do you get that? Do you like measure, I've heard people weigh themselves before and after. Is that what basically people do?
Yeah, so the most simple way to do it is to weigh yourself naked before you go for a run, then go for a run. And typically, it's just an hour. It just makes the math more easy. And, making sure that you don't drink any water during that run. And if you go to the bathroom, kind of, you can get a rough calculation of how much you lost from that. And then weigh yourself naked afterwards after you're toweling yourself down. And that gives you a rough idea of like, are you losing 2 pounds? Are you losing, I've seen like 5.5 pounds, which if someone's losing 5.5 pounds, like it is very important that like you get a sweat test, like sodium sweat test, because those numbers are probably going to be crazy high. And we're going to have to find some products that are going to get you, 1,000 milligrams per 500 milliliter of fluid ingested or more. And I've certainly worked with those athletes, and it's not like you can't be successful, but you certainly have to be more dialed versus if you're on the low end of that spectrum, you can pretty much use whatever products you want and get by.
Interesting. Dude, I have to be honest with you. Like, we've talked about this before offline, and like, me, I race short course stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I've been going through like, this is the second race in a row that I've had like ridiculous cramping. And so that's why I'm like, all right, I got to get this figured out. So
Yeah.
if anybody listening to this that gets cramping or like wants to know, like there's always an idea. There's always a way to be able to solve for that and try to figure it out. Like, that's why and I think one of the things too that I thought was kind of cool was like the precision stuff. Like it kind of told you, like, I guess it gives it an idea on the paper, like how many milliliter or how much sodium to take in like before. I think that's like my big thing is like how much to take in before, how much to take in during, and kind of figuring that out. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And I think a lot of people think that, it's just about the during piece of it, but similar to carbohydrates, like you have glycogen stores in your body, you also have salt stores in your body. And if someone's trying to like eat clean, as someone might say, like a big buzzword there, they might be ingesting less sodium in their diet on a regular basis, which is great from a health perspective if you're not like a heavy volume endurance runner that has these big races where it might be exposed and hot and you're using a bunch of that sodium. And so like in that example, you would really want to preload the night before, the morning of, and then be on top of kind of whatever that number is that you're losing so that you're not dealing with those cramps and dehydration, when you're descending in that last, descent to finish the race. You're chasing someone down. It's like, oh no, I can't move anymore as well as I want because I'm cramping and I got to slow down.
For sure. For sure. Do you have all your athletes do sweat? Like I was just talking to a coach recently and we were talking about lactate testing. We're talking about a few things. And like, that's how one of the things that did came up was like sweat testing. Like, do you have all your athletes do sweat tests and stuff like that or no?
Certainly sweat rate tests that they can do at home. I'm not going to tell someone to pay $200 to do this test just because like I know that most people are in a ballpark range that I'm going to recommend on a regular basis for their long runs and for their races. But certainly, if someone's having issues with it and, it's a constant problem and we're always trying to figure out like what's going wrong, why their legs are shutting down or they're feeling really dehydrated or their performance just drops way off in the second half of long runs and races, then certainly it's going to be top of mind for something that I recommend. Just because it's so easy to get done. You only need to do it once. And like, yeah, I get it's $200, but it goes a long way if, you get a lot of joy out of running these races at your best. And it's like, you just keep shutting down all the time. We might as well figure that out.
I agree. And this is the nerd in me too. For the lactate testing and VO2 testing at CTS, do you have to be a CTS athlete to do that? Or
No, you can come by whenever, man.
Oh, dude. All right.
Yeah.
We're going to be hanging out soon.
Yeah. I help out with those, but Renee Eastman, she's one of our cycling coaches and has been doing these tests for 25 years. She can give a good LTVO2 test. It takes a little bit of experience and kind of fine tuning with it. And then kind of putting it out in a way that you can understand and use it practically, I think is really valuable, even though like, you don't have to do it. It just certainly gives you a lot of really cool data and things that you can go off of, not only from a pacing and zones perspective, but also from a fueling perspective to just see, what you're burning at different intensities.
Oh, dude, on this topic. All right, let's talk about this because obviously I hear a lot of like the buzzwords are always like rate of perceived exertion. And then you meet a lot of coaches that also coach off of like, I know a ton of Nordic skiers, right? And a lot of them are so dialed on heart rate zones. How do you like, are you off of like, are you a rate of perceived exertion guy or are you like a heart rate zone coach? Like how does it?
Yeah, I think it really depends. And I think rather than saying I'm one versus the other, I like using tools and giving athletes different tools to help understand things better. Because certainly heart rate's going to play into your intensity. And if someone was to, do an LTVO2 test, we would have good heart rate zones for them to train at. But that being said, the issue with heart rate zone training is that there's a lot of things that can interfere with your heart rate at certain intensities. So caffeine, fatigue, lack of sleep, being in a hot environment. And so with those things, I don't want my athlete to be, just trusting these numbers on their watch and making decisions based on that. I want them to be intuitive about, how am I feeling? What does my heart rate say? What does my pace say? And how can I make a well-informed decision about whatever they're going through in the race? Whether it's like to make a hard move in the middle of an ultra, like you want to make sure that you're not burning too many matches early. And I think, being informed about kind of just internally how you're breathing and, could you talk to someone or are you totally just like breathing super hard, short and rapid, and it's you're already kind of working pretty hard? Probably not a good time to make another move to hold on to someone. But at the same time, like if you're just using RPE and you don't have an idea of like what your paces look like for, a faster race, then you could totally be going a little bit too fast or too slow. Because, at the start of the race, everyone feels fresh and awesome and wants to get after it. So I like a bunch of different things to kind of to corral the athlete into understanding where they're at intensity wise, where they need to be intensity wise over the course of the context of this race. Because you can rip in zone 3 and zone 4 heart rate wise if it's, going to be a really short Cirque Series climb, but I don't want you ripping in zone 4 if you're like 30 miles into a 100-mile race. Right. So it really depends.
That's so true. I gotta ask you this: in a world of like, dude, I see so many things like heart rate monitors and like now I see
I just saw this like hydration, because I'm obviously trying to figure out the hydration thing now,
Yeah.
but like I see this like sweat rate, like thing that you can wear on your arm. I've seen athletes wearing. Do any of these things work? Like, do you subscribe to any of these things, or is this just like fancy stuff to get people to like kind of pay for as like a monthly subscription? Like, is there, obviously you don't want to, tech can help, but like, I'm just curious, is like any of this stuff actually legit?
Yeah, I think there are some use cases for everything, but I think in this world of tech, there's a lot of things that like put themselves on the market before they're ready to be put on the market. And then, people get excited because they see it in, Let's Run or, Ultra Running Magazine, and they want to, try all these things. But it's like, is the utility of this going to add to your performance? Most of the time, no. Like basic things like getting a heart rate monitor is always going to be helpful because your watch heart rate can be finicky depending on the watch, and depending on the environmental conditions. If you're just not getting a good reading because your watch isn't kind of sticking to your skin well. But something like some of those continuous glucose monitors, like that can be helpful for a specific type of person in a specific use case. But I'm not going to tell everyone to buy one, for example, because a lot of people can get by with, their pace data using RPE well and a heart rate monitor. Like that is very basic and easy. I am curious about the continuous lactate monitors, especially for, track runners where, they have specific paces and specific goals for sessions. I think, you could do it in some cases on the trail, but when you're dealing with different inclines, then really like what are you trying to find, in terms of like pacing for specific climbs for a race? Are you trying to like dial in your zones or just make sure you're not overdoing things? Well, you can do that by just like knowing your heart rate zones, knowing your RPE at that intensity and kind of reading it off of that. But I could see, for someone who's doing specific, like the same track or road sessions, over and over and over, and they want to see how their lactate kind of changes or looks over time in these workouts, like it could be totally beneficial. But like I said, people are starting to produce these products, but like I think it's going to take another year or two before it's actually going to be reliable and worth our while.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's interesting. I mean, dude, there's a tech piece for it. Like, I didn't even bring up the glucose monitoring. I forgot all about that, but you see people with them all the time. Like, wow. Like, I think it was, I can't remember what specific athlete like showed me the sweat monitor, and I was like, oh, that's nifty, dude. But does it actually work? Like, does it?
Yeah. We've tested a couple of them, and they're so hit or miss. But that was also a few years ago, and we've kind of ditched them since. And so maybe they're awesome now, and maybe it's something worth looking into. I always think having a skeptical eye with a lot of things that look super new and shiny and innovative is the way to go, because you just never know, and they're going to market it like it's the coolest thing ever.
Right. No, so true. So true. All right. I got to ask you a question I ask every person that comes on this podcast. It's become a trend now, and I always love to get people's take on this. How have you've obviously been in the sport now for a few years, and you've seen the sport change drastically, as we all have. Yeah. What's your take on it? Are you excited to see like the direction of the sport is going? Like, are you liking it? Is there anything you don't like? Is there anything that throws up a red flag, or are you loving every aspect of it?
I mean, there's pros and cons to every sport and kind of the direction we're going. I think the community, as far as I've seen it lately, is still strong and inclusive and really kind of loving, which I like. Certainly with the professionalization of the sport, we're getting a lot of people that don't really know kind of what trail running is about coming into the sport and just trying to make a buck out of it, which, I'm skeptical of kind of the marketing and the branding and people just wanting to extract rather than provide and add to the sport. But on a whole, because I'm a coach and I love competing and I love the competitive side of the sport, I think it's awesome that more and more people are coming in and making it a more competitive sport. Like, if that means I finish 150th next OCC, but I had an awesome race and I was proud of it, so be it. Like, I want this sport to be as competitive as possible, because it'd be awesome if it was in the Olympics. It'd be awesome if it was on TV. It'd be awesome if, more of the US is, getting involved in it. But at the same time, there's going to be a lot of strain to to the added people in the sport. Like Western states, it's already really hard to get into. What happens if the sport triples in 5 years? Like that's a bummer for people that have been trying to get into Western states for years and years. So certainly there's going to be kind of its growing pains, but in general, I think the people that come into the sport come into it with true intentions of wanting to get the most out of themselves, explore nature, and, be a part of this community. And so I'm all for the direction it's going, as long as people who come into the sport don't want to make it something it's not, and make it about the gear and make it about making money and make it about all these other things that like aren't true to, I think, what makes this sport so awesome.
Dude, I love it. All right. So you want the Olympics to happen. I asked this question to everybody.
Yeah.
I always bring it up because I always bring up like TV rights, and I'm like, all right, if we do the Olympics, like our athletes got to make money. Like, I think that's 100%. The big thing.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think? It would be a VK? You think it would be flower format like Golden Trail? Like, what do you think they would go to? Like, I wonder this, or like a mountain classic.
I think it would be awesome if it was like a 3-stage event where all of the stages are like under 25K, but you have like a steep VK, you have like a, technical, like Broken Arrow-esque, where they can do like a course where there's awesome, viewership, like they can come up to aid stations. It's easily accessible. You can get kind of that Sierras and all vibe up a climb. That would be sick. But then also, maybe you get some flat, fast running in there too, where, they're going through town, kind of like how Golden Trail was, I think it was last year, where it was like a looped course. I think having a combination of all those things, I think would play to the strengths of different people. And so you'd have, a lot of commentary about, what course, what person that like a certain course favors. You can then have a lot of viewership. But at the same time, you can make it, more of an anaerobic event for the VK, but then you can always have those aerobic monsters that maybe are coming from the 50K distance, still be successful. For me, it's like you want to make it to where it's like as participant friendly for a bunch of different types of runners as possible, as well as viewer friendly, so that more people can buy into the sport.
I love it, dude. What do you think? You think we're 10 years away, 15 years away? Like, I think we're close. I mean, we got to get drug testing. Like, that's really important. Out of season drug testing, which is like, definitely. That's a whole nother conversation.
Totally. Yeah. And the problem is like, it's so expensive to do that well. And so you have to have enough money in the sport to do that well, but then you also have to pay the athletes enough for that to happen. And so I realized that, there needs to be money poured into the sport to make all of these competitive professional things happen. But certainly, for a lot of people that have been in the sport for a while, it certainly makes them nervous, the idea of more money getting poured in and it turning into something that it currently isn't. Yeah. And so I think there's a lot of good people that are like care a ton about this sport that will advocate for it to be treated the right way. And I think the Professional Trail Runners Association, them being a strong presence and continuing to be a strong presence, I think goes a long way in that, as well as just, you as a media member, me as a coach, continuing to kind of make sure that things aren't getting all wacky and out of control. But I hope it's in the next 10 years. That would be so cool. Because it would be awesome to see someone who's, a big, bright talent now be able to hold on to their career for that long, to see them in it with this new generation of runners. Because I think it would just be really special in this age of like, the sport rapidly growing, to have one of kind of the more homegrown runners, be able to maintain that fitness, to kind of be one of those old heads that's still crushing when we eventually, hopefully, get an Olympic spot.
Dude, that would be so crazy. But it's so true. I really agree with that. And my other thing with the Olympics is, and I've seen this brought up on a couple podcasts, and you think about it too, it's like when it comes to the greats, like, will it be judged against, because Joe's what, 41, 42? So yeah. If the Olympics is in 10 years, I mean, maybe
unfortunately, hopefully,
maybe he does. Not. He's an ageless wonder, but like, would that be like, does that get judged against you if you don't become an Olympian? But it's like that opportunity wasn't afforded to him, because if anyone was going to be it probably would have been him, right? Yeah. Like that opportunity wasn't afforded to him. So it's like, how does your legacy look back on you from the greats? And Matt Carpenter is a lot in the same way too. You can take ideas from that, because it's like the infrastructure of the sport wasn't that big in the time that he ran. So a lot of like outside of the mythos of Pikes Peak and who Matt Carpenter was and like Leadville and stuff like that, a lot of it faded into legend in a lot of ways, you know?
Yeah.
So, my only hope is that like when it does get that big, like we still remember the greats and those that, you know, and the people that contributed to the sport in the biggest ways, which is kind of,
I think we will. I mean, just like I'm a big sports fan in general. Like I follow basketball, I follow football, all the things. And when I think about like looking back to Bill Russell, for example, like people still hold him in reverence, even though like the likelihood of him being successful or as successful as he was in this day and age probably isn't as likely because Bill Russell isn't shooting threes like the rest of these bigs now, for example. But a conversation that I like to have with a lot of the coaches is we're kind of seeing this change is like, where are we relative to another famous sport? Like if we talk about MMA, for example, also a huge growing sport, like where, if we were to put ourselves as a sport into the context of another sport, like, are we kind of in the Bill Russell era of, you know, trail running right now? Or are we in the Larry Bird, Magic Johnson era? Or are we in the Michael Jordan era? Like, meaning, you know, it's going to become a lot bigger. We're going to have a lot more investment into the sport. It's going to get more competitive. I'm just curious, where are we in the spectrum? Like, is Jim Walmsley, would he get, you know, 12th at OCC 20 years from now? Or is he still winning? I don't know. But it's a really fun, you know, thing to throw around.
It's so interesting because, dude, and you take an athlete like Jim, right? And, you know, Jim's not young, dude. Jim's 35 and he's still winning these races, which is bananas.
Yeah.
And given the athletes that he kind of came up with and trained with, who a lot of them are no longer in the sport anymore. So it's like, what is it that makes Jim different and what makes him special? Right. It's, you know, and like you said, like, is that an athlete that really is an ageless wonder in the sense where like, how will his times like hold up against 2040, 2035 OCC and stuff like that? Yeah. It makes you wonder. It's interesting.
I mean, Matt Carpenter's records only fell with Remy 2 years ago?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, what's to say some of Jim's records aren't going to stick around for another 20 years? I don't know. But
possible. Yeah.
We certainly have a bunch of crushers that are coming up in the women's side and the men's side. So we'll see.
That's true. Well, let me ask you this one last question. Are you guys like constantly in the white papers, especially as the sport evolves and grows? Or are you guys constantly like reading the research and like changing things and tweaking things? Or do you kind of keep the ship steady? Like, how do you make adjustments as you guys go from a coaching?
Yeah. I mean, as far as like research, it's always evolving and we're always trying to stay on top of it. And, you know, if there's something that comes out that's contradictory to what we're doing, certainly we're going to weigh it. But, you know, certainly, you know, the things that we try to do, it's not just, you know, one paper that we're going off of. We're trying to, you know, because not everything's also about ultra running. You know, you have other sports where there's other kind of tests with, you know, similar aerobic energy systems that we're trying to glean off of. And so we're trying to make educated guesses with the information that we have. And certainly the more information that comes out, the better we can make those decisions. Because the reality is, I think a lot of people who aren't in kind of the kinesiology space think that, you know, there's certain things that are for sure true and like no matter what, nothing's going to change that. But like the reality is like I feel like we're only like 10% figuring out, you know, as like all of the different scientific data and research that could benefit our sport. You know, there's only a certain amount of money that can get poured into research. And so we're getting whatever, you know, people deem as a good research paper for their universities and colleges, and whatever we get, we're going to grab and read and try to implement that if it's, you know, a well done research article and we think it's, you know, potentially going to help our athletes. But there's a long ways to go in the science space. We're continuing to learn more. There's continuing to be more technology and like we were talking about ways to monitor intensity and, you know, make adjustments to training based on, you know, what we see and what's out there. And so it's not the Wild West, but it's certainly not all figured out either. And we're just doing our best to make those educated guesses and be as professional as we can about it.
I love it. I love it. I feel like that's a good place to stop. Addison Smith, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, man.
Dude, we'll have to do more of these. Like, I really like, I want to maybe start a mini series talking about
I'm down.
Coaching and stuff like that. Dude, thank you so much for coming on. I will see you tomorrow. Appreciate it.
All right, man. Thanks so much. See ya.
Yep.
What'd you guys think? Oh man, I want to thank Addison so much for coming on the podcast. Lots of good stuff, lots of good nuggets of wisdom, and just good pieces of information. He is just full of just so much good info. So really excited to have a chat with him. Looking forward to further chats down the line. I'm thinking like maybe we do like a mini series or something cool for like short trail coaching and stuff like that. I think there's be some good stuff for the audience to take away there. I don't know, maybe we'll get something in the pipeline. It'd be kind of fun. Guys, before you get going, the best way you can support Addison is to give him a follow on Instagram. And if you are in the market for a coach, click the link in his bio. You can find him on Instagram at Addison_Smith16. That's ADDISON_Smith16. And on his bio, you can find him if you guys are in the market for a coach right now and are interested in working with CTS and someone as talented as Addison. You can find him at trainright.com/coaches/Addison Smith. Or if you just go into the Google search, type in Addison Smith CTS, you will be able to go onto their website and book a consultation with him and ask him any questions or check his availability. I'm sure he'd be interested and receptive if you guys are looking for a coach right now. So go ahead and check that out and let him know also what you guys thought about the episode. Guys, before you get going, the best way you can support this podcast is give us a 5-star rating and review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you consume your podcasts. You can also support us by going on ultimatedirection.com. And if you're in the market for a new vest, belt, any type of hydration solution, water, flask, or soft flask, the best way you can do is support us through that. Use code SteepStuffPod. That's SteepStuffPod, one word, and that's going to get you 25% off your cart. Ultimate Directions just dropped some really good stuff. A new Ultra Vest, 12 liter, as well as a Race Vest, 6 liter. They're in some beautiful colorways. They're brand new. They're completely different than other vests that they've dropped in their lineup. They're super dynamic and stretchy and kind of form to any body or body type. Also, make sure to check out the new quiver as well. They just dropped a quiver that's really dope that kind of fits to any of their vests in their lineup. And that's going to help you if you're kind of in the long trail scene or the short trail scene and looking for something to hold your poles. If you guys are pole people, you can definitely use the quiver there to help you on every day, as well as do 2 different types of belts. Their utility belt and their comfort belt both work really well on race day and training. Lots of storage in there and all kinds of good stuff. So, guys, hope you enjoy it. Like I said, use code SteepStuffPod. That's going to get you 25% off your cart. And lots of good stuff coming down the pipeline this week. We got lots of big stuff coming out for the Rut, for the Pikes Peak Marathon and Ascent, as well as World Mountain Running Champs. I've got some stuff in the pipeline. It's going to be all kinds of really cool stuff that I'm super excited about. On top of that, this Thursday, if you guys happen to be on the Front Range, this Thursday night at 5:30 p.m., pop on over to the La Sportiva store in downtown Boulder. Guys, I'm going to be interviewing Anton Krpichka. Super excited for this opportunity. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to ask him all kinds of good questions. I think he'll get a kick out of it. I think you guys will too. I think it'll be a super fun in-person interview. Super nervous for this one. Should be kind of fun. Guys, have a great rest of your week. Thanks so much.